Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. My effusive apologies for anybody who tried to join us an hour ago. I confess that I managed to get the scheduling wrong, and I am very sincerely sorry. What a glorious screw up. For those of you who aren't able to join us live due to the scheduling error again being me screwing up, we'll go ahead and make this available after the fact. So we'll get your questions together and we'll go ahead and make sure we can get them answered for you. I'm especially excited today because I get to apologize. And who doesn't like to apologize when they screw up? Again, my apologies. But also because we're having somebody incredibly brilliant joining us today. And not just somebody brilliant, but somebody brilliant who's going to be talking to us about something especially relevant. So many of you are joining us from the Free Web Development Bootcamp. Some of you are joining us from the wider internet. And I've been really unkindly hammering it home to the learners on the bootcamp that you must build accessible web experiences and websites. And today, Parham's going to be joining us to talk about not just his work, because he's the head of accessibility. It's terribly fancy, isn't it? Over at booking.com. He's also one of the smartest people I've ever met. And he's just really laid back about it. But he's also going to talk to us about his experience as a screen reader user on the web and really what it looks like, or what it feels like much more accurately, when the web's not configured to serve you much of anything. I think it's more fair to let Parham introduce himself. Parham, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, and good morning, evening, afternoon, night, whatever it is. It's really hard to greet people now in the new post-COVID. Can I call this post-COVID?
Oof. I mean, for a lot of places, it's not quite, is it?
Yeah,
Uh,
COVID era.
for these challenging times, that's a way to say it, isn't it?
Yeah, or fun. Working from home times. I mean, yeah,
That's a working from home times.
yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what kind of work you do?
Yeah, sure. So I've been really lucky to join as the engineering manager of accessibility at Booking for the past like 3 months. Previously, I was in core infrastructure working on like Kubernetes-based cloud deployment software and a whole bunch of um, too nerdy to list things. Uh, but like I've mostly been, because of the fact that I'm completely blind and I was born blind. My career has been basically built around being places where there is no sight required, and most of the time that's been too much in the back end.
Okay. So can you talk a little bit about that? And I think that maybe our learners are going to have some similar questions, but what does it look like to be a developer who's not sighted? To say, hey, I'm going to get into the backend and do this backend work. How does that happen?
Yeah, so there are a there's a lot of education that you kind of like need to do with your colleagues about what you're capable of doing and what you're not. Mostly, I found that people are leaning toward what you're not capable of doing, which I mean makes total sense in the sense that it's really hard to imagine a day without being able to see. It's kind of like for me imagining a day without being able to hear, I would go crazy. So understandably, a lot of my career has been working with product managers, people managers, uh, fellow peers about like what can I do and what can I not do. And that's been kind of like the most challenging aspect of it. The rest has been the more technical. Okay, how do I do it? Which I can go more into the details of if people are interested.
Yeah, if you don't, well, let's go ahead. Did you have some things you wanted to say first? I'm going to stay on the line in case we have any questions because I love to interrupt people smarter than me. But was there anything about your experience or anything about your work that you want to describe or talk a bit more about?
Yeah, so a little bit about how I work, so that everyone has some idea of what I'm going to share. Um, but so what they use is it's called a screen reader, and uh, Jess has been telling me how great you all are and how you know this whole thing about screen readers and stuff. But for anyone who might not have caught her hammering you with all of this stuff, a
I
screen
use
reader,
actual hammers as well, just to be
yeah,
super mean.
yeah,
I'm
I
just
thought so. Yeah.
brutally abusing all the learners.
Yeah, and so like a screen reader is basically a piece of software that interacts with your operating system to pull out information about what's on the screen. Uh, to TLDR, it reads out what's on the screen. and, and so like the reason that first definition is really important is if a developer or a designer did not design or develop the code or the screen in a way that takes that into account, that takes the fact that there's going to be some software pulling some information out of our program, our website, our phone app, what ends up happening is that the screen reader cannot do its job.
Okay.
So yeah, so I might hear button, which is not really useful because I don't know what this button does. It's just a button. And it could be, do you want me to destroy your house button? And then I could just, you know,
So
and
common on the web.
yeah. Well, maybe more common on the apps, but yeah. So, so like there's all of these little changes that is kind of like required for more, like most web applications or apps, to kind of like make them usable. And what I'm hoping I can kind of like do here is convince you that it's really important for you to learn these skills in a way that it's basically part of your job. As long as accessibility is something that you do separately, it's kind of like this refactoring of code that has been written in the past. No one really gets to do it, and you always have to convince people, and it's always hard. So better write better code in the beginning. And accessibility is exactly that. It's just better code and better design.
And a lot of our learners haven't encountered they're so lucky. They're living in this like beautiful greenfield land where they're learning the individuals. They've Many of them may have never heard the term refactor before. What's refactoring in programming aside from
Yes.
a myth?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Refactoring is something everyone wishes they could do. No. So refactoring is basically when you have written some piece of code and somewhere down the line, like 3 months later, 6 months later, 1 year later, you realize, oh wow, this code, I thought it's pretty, but now that I've grown in my career and in my knowledge and in my understanding, I'm like, this was some horrible who wrote that? Was that me? And I've been, I personally have done this where I'm like, who wrote this stupid piece of code? Let me look at the history of who committed. Oh, is that me? Why did I do that? So like and then what you usually do when you encounter such a piece of code is you do what's called a refactoring, which is you basically update it with your latest knowledge to date. You move some pieces of code around, you remove some of them, you put some of them into a better, more readable form, and it's called a refactoring. As your experience grows, you get to a point where you don't need to refactor as much. You just write better code from the very beginning. And that's what I guess sets experienced programmers aside from like less experienced programmers. Everyone has good intentions. It's just that as you go and grow and build your skills, you get to write better code faster. That's basically that.
Yeah. So it sounds like refactoring is when you go back and say, "Oh, I know better now. I'm going to redo this. I'm going to sweep it off the table and redo it, and I'm going to do a good job this time." But as you suggest, getting to refactor everything, so rewrite all your code to make it more accessible, doesn't always happen in the real world. That may sometimes people are sometimes teams are, and I'm doing the little quote fingers, but too busy to go back and add accessibility. Is that something you find?
Yeah, totally. That's basically always the same thing goes for, and like security. I just want to make the point here that accessibility is not the only case where this is happening. Security in organizations is a big topic where this is happening. Compliance in some organizations where they need to be tightly regulated is where this is happening. And accessibility is one other form of this thing where, as you kind of like get better at empathizing with people, your
Oh,
skills to write better software and design better software increases as well.
that's really exciting. So this idea of empathy as sort of as a tool in your developer toolkit seems really relevant.
Yeah, it's certainly not something that you hear a lot about. There's all of these books about how to write great Node.js code, or how to, I don't know, use React or Webpack or whatever the latest technologies are. Um, and like empathy is just not one of the skills that we get to throw around that much, unless it's somewhere around an actual person is going to be sitting on the actual other side of this actual web application. So like, if you're not really thinking of them as you're creating this application, they're going to have a really horrible time using it. And um, if like one story I have to tell around this is like, I'm very social, right? So I invite people over all the time. And usually what I do is I just communicate way in advance so that I can get people over here, because there's usually like 8, 10, 12 people. And one of these days, I actually had ordered some groceries.
Oh,
Yeah, and it's really convenient. That app is super convenient because I don't need to go all the way to the supermarket, and I don't need to carry all of that stuff back because I'm using a they call it a blind stick, cane, whatever you call it, which is the thing that blind people use to sense into what's beside them or in front of them so that they don't bump into it. And so like this really useful application, and you know, this person delivers the groceries, and I go to pay with my bank. Turns out this bank has made some latest changes to them, and I've forgotten my debit card password, and I can't really reset the password anymore. And so this guy's standing in front of the door, and then he's just waiting for me to try
oh,
and figure out, where is the reset password? Not this thing. And then I basically, I after like 5 minutes, I just felt horrible, and I was like, I'm sorry, I just give up. I can't pay you. I'm sorry. And he just picked up everything and he
I
left.
mean, that's a on his part reasonable, but oh, and from the bank's perspective, why should I? And that's actually, I was going to sarcastically ask, oh, why should I even test that flow for screen reader users? But this
Yeah.
is why. We had a learner in. We've got some questions already from my learners are just the smartest people on the internet. They're so nice. So we've got a lot of really good questions. And was somebody asked me yesterday and said, "Oh, Jess, I can't make it to the session tomorrow." They were so apologetic. They were sweethearts, and they said, "Is there a tool that I can use to test what my websites will look like or sound like, much more accurately, to a user of a screen reader?"
Um, so the easiest way to do this, I guess it depends on what operating system you're on. If you're on iOS, there's something called VoiceOver that is a built-in accessibility feature. You can Google that to figure out how to turn that on. It's VoiceOver with no spaces. So that's VOICE and then OVER. The same technology is on Mac OS. So if you search turn on VoiceOver on Mac OS, you can do the same. It's as easy as just pressing Command and F5 on Mac. On Windows, it gets a little bit more tricky because you need to go and download a free screen reader called NVDA. So that's N like November, V like Victor, and D like Delta, and A like Alpha. And it's very close to NVIDIA, the
Can you
video
say that one
card.
more time?
It's N like
N.
November, V like Victor, D like Alpha, and A like, sorry, D like Delta and A like Alpha.
Yeah, I've got it. It's almost Nevada but not quite.
Yeah.
How nice and
Or
frustrating.
NVIDIA without all the I's.
Oh gosh, that's a much easier way to remember it.
Yeah, and you can just download that and install it on your computer. There are some, if you Google, there are some really good tutorials about how to get started with a screen reader. There's like a little bit of a learning curve for like 2 hours, but I mean, if you can already master JavaScript,
We
a
haven't done
screen reader is
JavaScript
like,
yet.
okay,
Whoop,
HTML.
whoop. Yeah, HTML and CSS.
If you can do
We're coming in
HTML,
the basics.
right, great. So if you can do HTML, you're like gonna learn a screen reader in like 1 hour tops.
Yeah, it's way easier than CSS, right?
And way less annoying.
Mm,
Maybe I'm
mm,
talking from
mm.
a point of someone who never saw the results, but okay.
It just occurred to me as I was like, no, CSS is. You know what? We probably having very different experiences with CSS, aren't we?
Yep.
So that's really really helpful. So we've got iOS has voiceover, Mac OS has voiceover built in, and then NV. Oh gosh,
NVDA.
NVDA.
Yep.
Oh, and gosh, the website for that is NV Access instead. I
Yes.
got it. I got it. So that's been kicked over to the learners. We've got a couple other questions as well. And Dragnarok is saying, hey, you talked about refactoring code. And this is going to be a tricky general programming question. Are you ready? How often do you, yeah, how often is code usually refactored? Like, people go through and refactor it every
Like
couple of
every day.
months or
Yeah.
yeah, how often in a real life, real world sorry, and you're laughing because is the answer not often enough?
Yeah, and it's a common point of contention between people who actually write the code and people who actually prioritize the work that needs to be done. Mostly because it's really hard to talk about the impact. Like, what happens if I don't have accessibility in here? Like, some guy's going to need it while they're waiting for groceries, and they're not going to be able to pay. And like the same goes for refactoring for performance. Like, what happens if I don't refactor this? And most people usually, and this is why I'm giving you stories around accessibility. Most people are not, because of the fact that there's, most of us don't really have people with disabilities in our network that we usually go to and gather information from. We're not really good at convincing ourselves and others about why something should be prioritized. And by the time someone needs that, that's not like gonna work because it never got prioritized. So as you get better at putting yourself in your user's shoes, you get better at understanding them and raising that issue in a story that makes sense in for a product manager or a manager or a VP or whatever role you're talking to.
So the ability to sort of go to the people telling you what to do and tell them what to do instead.
Yeah, I wouldn't really word it that way, mostly because it takes the collaboration out of it. But yeah, I guess collaboratively define what's worth doing. Maybe I like that better.
Okay. You're a much nicer person than I am. So you're like, oh yeah, let's collaborate. And I'm like, no,
It's
this way they
nice.
must. And I'm not as knowledgeable in this space, but I think I know definitely in the US, there have been some legal pronouncements, some lawsuits, but I think within the European Union as well, that there are more and more legal requirements around making your websites and making your web experiences accessible.
Yeah, and I think in in Europe that's going to come into effect in the June of 2025.
Oh, that's
Uh,
ages.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. For me, it is. But like, and 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 this is the thing. that I wanted to mostly, I hope everyone here can take away from this. If I'm going to wrap up everything I'm trying to say in just one sentence, here it is. If what you're working on is worth using, if what you're working on is actually something useful, if it's solving a real problem, then you have to make it accessible so that everyone can use it. Because otherwise, you're not solving that problem. You're only solving it for a select few of people. You're not really solving it for everyone. So if you really believe that what you're doing is worth doing, then you owe it to the world to make that accessible. And what's happening with these rules and laws and regulations is that sometimes accessibility becomes this box you have to tick. Because like,
Mm.
hey, here is some 10 standards that we have to meet, and let's just do that, and that's it. But one of the most important things about accessibility and all of these like other things like security and compliance, but I'm talking specifically about accessibility here, is that if you do the bare minimum, you're going to pass that law and regulation. Everyone's going to be happy in the fact that your company doesn't have to pay the fine, but some user someday is going to have to have the same problem as the problem that your application is trying to solve, and they're going to be stuck because your application doesn't cater to their needs. And at the end of the day, the problem is not that they have a disability, it's just that they're interacting with a poorly designed and written application.
So I've got a question from a learner, and it's really, really good. But we're going to go and do that question from a learner and then come back because you've talked about, oh, if you're doing something that you think is important. A question I want to come back around to is what kinds of things? I'd love to have a discussion about what kinds of applications or what kinds of web experiences need to be accessible, because I bet that you're going to have some really good points. But from one of my learners, Tanya's saying, hey. Oh, saying they're my learners is very bold. One of the learners, they own themselves. I'm not the boss of them. Tanya saying, hey, can you talk us through how do readers work? Like step by step, what do they do?
Okay, so I'm going to use VoiceOver on Mac for an example. So the VoiceOver is made up of two components. One of them is gathering information from the operating system. So it's asking, oh, I just noticed that the user pressed tab. What should I say? And then the operating system gives some information to that screen reader, like, okay, so they landed on this thing, which is a button. It's a component and the type is a button. Or well, let's start with the checkbox. Maybe that's even more interesting. They've landed on a component type, which is called the checkbox. And the state right now is checked. So they've ticked the box. It's kind of like I agree, and it's already ticked, right? And then when I press space, the operating system tells VoiceOver, hey, I think the state just changed. It was ticked, but now it's unticked. And then VoiceOver just gathers this information, right? So that's component number one, which is constantly talking with the operating system, trying to figure out what changed where to what. And then there's the second component, which is turning that stuff into speech. So it says, I agree to the terms and conditions checkbox unchecked, or I agree
Oh,
to the terms and conditions checkbox checked, which is telling me you just landed on a checkbox, it is checked or unchecked, and this is what it says, I agree to the terms and conditions. And so if any of these information is missing and VoiceOver can't pull it out of that application, I'm going to hear something random. So I'm going to hear, I agree to the terms and conditions button instead of a checkbox, for example. Or I'm going to hear, I agree to the terms and conditions checkbox. I don't know if it's checked or unchecked. Or I'm
ah,
gonna hear checkbox. I'm not sure what I'm doing if I tick it or not tick it. And so like when you're building a web application, what does that actually look like? When you're saying in an HTML that you have a button, you're helping a screen reader discern, oh, this is a component and the type of it is button. I should say it's a button. And when you give it a label
Which
by
we
putting,
learned about yesterday and on Monday. Nice.
yay, then you're telling the screen reader, okay, if someone presses tab or uses whatever other screen reader keystrokes and lands on this button, you should tell them this is next or confirm or whatever. If you don't provide this, maybe you decide, you know what, I'm going to be really, really not, like pretty, and I'm going to make this an icon instead of some text.
Ooh.
I'm going to give them, like, instead of inbox, I'm going to put an envelope icon, and it's so cool
Oh,
because,
yeah, that sounds delightful. What a pretty experience.
yeah, because everyone can see it and everyone knows what an envelope
Ooh.
is, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh. I didn't even stop to think that even for folks who are sighted, that there's going to be the opportunity for cultural disconnect.
Yeah, yeah. And if you just put that icon like with an IMG tag, I'm going to hear image button, which is like, what is this? What happens if I click this? And that's where accessibility usually goes wrong, where people try to make something pretty without really learning about what it actually means when you try to use it with some sort of assistive technology.
So, really, we're coming back around to the idea that when we're building for the web, these semantic elements, these elements in HTML that carry a lot of meaning, like button with the label included, and you're giving much better reasons than my or else. Or else is indeed a where you're like, add labels or else. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think grown-ups aren't scared of monsters coming and getting them, so I can't properly threaten them.
yeah,
But you saying, hey, let me describe to you what it feels like too. Just have a, oh, hey, here's a checkbox. And you're like, well, what checkbox? You're like, well, just a checkbox.
yeah. And you know, these are really tiny things. Like when you notice now that as I'm not talking, you're not maybe hearing any background noise from my side. And that's because I'm constantly muting and unmuting myself. And imagine if this button was not labeled correctly, I would never know. And this is actually a
Oh,
problem that I face every day in some form or another. I will never know if my microphone is on or off. So I will be talking like, hey, Jess, this is really exciting. I really like this. And Jess is like, Parham, I don't hear you.
oh, yeah. Oh gosh, because even on the hardware, it's so rare these days to find. I'm looking at my own mic, and my mic on and volume switch is a series of lights. Um, you know what? This is very, very goofy and selfish of me, but it never occurred to me how this hardware design is decidedly not accessible. Woof. You can't see me looking distressed at it, so I will continue to make my woof sound. We've got a couple other really good questions, and I'm going to bop to Catherine's question and then come back up to Tanya, who is a nut. Tanya, all of these folks just ask the best questions. And Catherine's saying, hey, would a screen reader be able to pick up a class attribute as a label? Would class be enough of a label? Or do I have to put an explicit label when I'm making a button or when I'm making a entry on a form?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. Like, what does a screen reader actually get from that element? And class ID, data, all of these other attributes, they are not really communicated to a screen reader. What is communicated to the screen reader is the type, like span, paragraph, button, uh, input, whatever the element type is, and also some specific accessibility information if you decide to include it. So remember when I said maybe someone decides, hey, you know what, I'm going to use the icon of an envelope instead of some text
Yeah.
that says inbox, right? That person can still make a screen reader say something that's actually not visible on the screen. So when you're creating a button, you can say, like, you can just open the less sign and then button and then put in aria, that's ARIA dash label equals, I don't know, and then in quote inbox, and then just have your image inside that button. What's going to happen is you've given explicit information to the screen reader to say, you know what, ignore whatever is in it because this is an image for some reason, and I've decided not to include any text. But you know what, our designer thought this is a really cool idea, and I just want to give them the envelope, and then you can still tell the screen reader very explicitly what to say, and this is not pulled out of any HTML attributes other than the ones that start with ARIA. So all of these are around communicating information to screen readers, and all of them start with ARIA, and that means accessible, rich internet applications. So if you want to kind of like get a list of what's available, there's a whole ton of information about, you can make trees, you can make menus, you can make, I don't know, sliders and all sorts of carousels and all sorts of weird things.
I'm going to ask you I'm going to ask you a little bit of a leading question though. But of course, if you've got a semantic HTML, if you've got HTML options that communicate that information, like, I don't know, maybe label, you're going to want to use the HTML, the built-in HTML options before adding ARIA, right?
No.
Oh no, I thought you were going to back me up on this, but I'm wrong. I love being wrong.
No, I was just going to create some tension. Sorry. Yeah, so obviously that's totally true. The reason that there is semantics in HTML is because it's better to use that semantics, and it's not only screen readers that use that. Like, I'm not really sure if you've noticed this in your phone or even on your desktop browsers nowadays. There's like a reading mode or all sorts of kind of like extra functionality that your browser provides where it hides some parts of the page. And the reason that such functionality actually works is because it's leaning on the developers to use semantic markup. So if you're saying, let's say you have a blog and the content it's mostly content driven, by marking up which parts of your page or the menu or the sidebar or the footer and all of that stuff, you're also giving the browser more information so that if someone tries to put things in the reading mode or zoom in even closer or use any sort of assistive technology or any sort of technology that's going to come in the future that's going to pull out data with AI out of your page and all of that stuff, you're giving all of them information on what actually each of these pieces of text mean. And that's why it's called semantic markup.
Yeah. So it's not just better for humans, but it's better for robots as well. And the robots of the future who we haven't even imagined yet.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I'm going to have a follow-up question to that in a second, but I'm going to come back a little. Let's do the follow-up question. Oh, actually, we've got somebody who has a useful. You've given conference talks, and sometimes people say, "Oh, I've got more of a comment than a question," and it's always bad, right? We have somebody who has a useful one and set up. So Platypus is coming in to say, you've mentioned the iOS and Mac and the Windows ones. And Platypus is saying, oh, hey, if you want to try testing this out for Linux, there's Orca. And for Android, there's the talkback functions for testing screen readers or sort of screen reader-like experiences.
Yes, totally. Thanks a lot for chipping in with that.
Oh, Platypus just keeps me honest. I'm wrong all the time. And they're just such sweethearts about me like, well, no, you're wrong, but in a loving way.
They didn't say I was wrong.
Oh, no, you're not wrong. I'm wrong.
No, but they didn't say you're wrong either. They just
give them time.
Okay,
I'll be wrong. Yeah.
Okay, so this is just like the icebreaker. Okay, great. I like.
I'm consistently wrong, and they never make me feel bad about it. They just like, oh, hey, learners, y'all might want to not do that thing.
Completely ignore Jess for a while. Yes, okay.
I mean, consistently, really. This is really about lovely folks like you and our learners, and I'm just a consistent goofball. Tanya's coming back to your point about empathy, which I think is really useful. And Tanya's saying, hey, how do you think people can better understand your point of view and really the point of view of users with a range of different experiences? Because in general, not everybody might be able to think of your experiences. Maybe folks who are developing don't have, screen reader users even existing in their head in a loud and consistent way.
Yeah.
How can people better empathize with folks with a different range of needs?
So this is a really great question because it touches on the very big nuances of life, universe, and the and everything basically.
It's really
But
like, how can I be a better person? Yeah,
yeah,
it's a big question. Come
yeah.
on, Parham, no pressure. Solve the world.
um, okay. I guess 42 is a cliche answer, so I'm not going to give that. But but like the thing is that I think there are two aspects to your question, and I'm going to try to address both of them and do ask follow-up questions just to make sure that I've got you correct. And the first one is, how do I become a better, more empathetic person when it
Ooh.
comes to like putting myself in the shoes of people who might be interacting with my application in a different way than I usually do. And the answer to that is something that I think you already know, which is you try to build that into your awareness by just trying it. So,
Oh,
like in the beginning, it's going to be hard. In the beginning, you're going to be like, oh, screen read. Do I really have to like open the screen reader and test this out? Or, oh my God, do I have to do this Zoom thing again? Or do I have to turn on switch control and kind of like pretend like I'm actually navigating the web with my mouth, like people with motor impairments do? And like, but like after you do this for like 30, 40 times, you will already start noticing patterns like, oh, if I'm putting things in a random order, when I'm pressing tab, my cursor jumps around in all sorts of weird ways. Like I'm going to the header, then the footer, then the search box, but maybe I think it makes more sense to go from the header to the search box and then to the footer. And so you start having these ideas, these general um, I guess, a general high level understanding of how things work. And over time, you don't really need to get into the nitty gritty details until you really need to verify something. I've been working with developers who, just through curiosity, a lot of developers contact me on my website and they're like, hey, I'm really afraid of going blind one day. And so I
oh,
started using voiceover randomly and now I'm a pro. And like, and I may not be even going blind, but like now I don't even need to open voiceover to kind of imagine how it would work. So that I've had people reaching out saying exactly the fact that you get better at it with time, and you will get to a point where you don't even need to think about it and it just becomes a part of you. And that's how you get better at empathy.
I love these too because you were like, oh, empathy through practice. So, oh, I'm going to make myself a list of the different types of needs. I'm going to do this. And then you mentioned something that had never occurred to me where you've got folks who've gotten in touch and say, hey, I'm really afraid of a bunch of different things. And through this fear, like I did not know that fear driven accessible development was a thing.
Well, yeah. And I think that's a really great way to think about it. It's when you don't have enough information about something, it scares you, obviously. um, and they're very like, I don't know, uh, many reasons for that. But the thing is that as you get better at gathering that knowledge, you get better at, first of all, calling it up on demand much faster, but also you get better at teaching it, you get better at
Oh,
applying it. And then this is the second part of your question, Tanya, that I wanted to get to, which is, it sounds like you're also asking, how do we solve this bigger problem of people not being aware of accessibility? And that
ooh,
is people like you being right here, getting it curious about something that they can do today, like a small, tiny, tiny action, and then getting drawn into this world that they didn't even know existed yesterday, and becoming evangelists, becoming people who know something really well, and they go and teach people that might not be aware of this context or the subject existing, and that's basically how we change the world. It's one person at a time.
Oh, that sounds
Wow, that was
incredibly
so
cool.
cheesy,
No,
but
shush. I mean, you are a huge cheese ball, but that was absolutely lovely. And it sounds like we've got sort of a flow chart with two different paths. So how do I get better? You say, oh, well, you can either take your deep-seated fear and use that to drive it, where it's like very specific, probably, or you can consciously practice these. And as you do so, also sort of evangelize, also put out in the world, hey, I'm learning this stuff, or I'm getting better at this stuff. You should too. Can I teach you? Can I help you? So, really, what you're saying is that by me consistently threatening the learners I work with, that's a public service, right?
exactly. Even if you're using actual habits.
Cool. So yes, be as mean to the learners as I can. Fabulous to get an official expert saying that this is a good way to do it.
Yeah, yeah. Please don't quote me on this.
No, it's already going into the course material. It's too late.
Crap. Okay.
And Catherine's coming back. So we had been talking about, oh hey, earlier Catherine had been asking, how can I just use, will the screen reader pick up class instead of label? And we were like, well, no. And when I say we, I mean you. I was like, oh. And then Catherine, as a follow up, is asking, oh heck. As a follow up, oh, will a screen reader pick up class if I don't add a label? And then they're asking, well, what about the title attribute on a link? If I hover over this as a sighted person, I get a little sort of text pop up that
Yeah.
shows what's going to happen. Is there a similar thing? Is a link going to give you that additional sort of hint about where it goes and what it does?
Yeah, so there is the power of using semantic markup. As long as you're using things that are part of the HTML schema, they say, um, the screen readers know how to deal with it. So if you provide a title on a link that like says something like, I don't know, opens in a new window, or click here to learn more, or and then there is like the more has a title that says, I don't know, achievements in 2021, so that people kind of like have an idea of what more actually means. Then the screen reader actually does speak that. So as long as you're using actual attributes that are in HTML, then you're totally fine. What needs a little bit of discernment on your side as you get more and more into the course and you start to learn more and more about all sorts of, I guess, add-ons to HTML, is sometimes the frameworks and the pieces of code that you're using and you find on the internet are actually not using HTML attributes. And
Ooh.
yeah, and they're using specific things that are very specific to that framework, and I'm sure you'll get there someday, very soon. And then it becomes a lot more important that, like, oh, when I'm putting in data dash title, this doesn't seem like something that was in HTML. Let me double check. Is this something that's in HTML? Nope. Oh, okay. So probably a screen reader is not going to catch it unless this framework somehow turns that into a title in the HTML that it generates, which usually is not the case. So be on the lookout for these attributes that are very like framework focused, or like very specific to a CSS library that you might be using, or once you get to JavaScript, a JavaScript library that you might be using,
Oh
and those are
yeah,
the
they'll
ones that
get
get
you.
tricky.
So, really, what you're suggesting is that, and I'm going to paraphrase you, and I'm going to do it completely wrong, and it's going to be agenda driven. Watch. So, what you're really suggesting is to be a more accessible developer and to be a better developer. We're going to get as controversial as we can. You should try and write plain old CSS over using libraries. Oh, cool. Yeah, yeah. I saw you nod just a little bit. Cool. So I'll ask the second half. And really, to go ahead and use HTML over JavaScript, and especially over JavaScript libraries, when they achieve the same function.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
oh, I got a hard yes there. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, this one I totally get. Um, I think people might be a little bit anxious sticking to your very first point.
Okay.
So I'm going to say I'm going to make my usual like mark on everything and make it softer by saying like if you're using a library that's like CSS or JavaScript and it's giving you extra functionality that is not available in HTML, do test it out with a screen reader, with Zoom, with like a switch controls, anything that you already have on your devices. Do test it out, and maybe it is completely usable, and maybe it's not. Either way, as you get better at understanding the quirks of that technology, then you get better at picking up where it's accessible and where it's not. And
Maybe.
maybe I
So
can pick,
gentle.
yeah, maybe you even like contribute a fix to that library, whether it's CSS or
Oh,
JavaScript or something,
yeah.
to make it accessible for everyone. Because like this is where it gets really crazy, right? You guys are learning something here about like, oh yeah, there's an actual human that's using this stuff, right? And then one day you encounter this library that's not accessible. By adding accessibility features to something really small, now you've made thousands of web applications accessible in a tiny way.
Oh.
And see what happens if you add that up, right? That's insane. That's an insane amount of impact that you can have in the world.
So with because I'm mean to the learners all the time, when I went we talk a lot about the things you can do when you don't know when you've got a question, a new question or a weird question. I always say the three things you can do are ask someone else, which they're doing right now. You can look it up or you could test it out. And it sounds like when we're talking about accessibility, specifically around frameworks, you're adding an extra sort of responsibility that sits after that to say, hey, look it up and test it out. And if it's not accessible, you've got this additional homework of fix it if you can. So fix it back in the project.
Yeah, and this is something that I've realized as I've worked with very talented developers at Booking, and I mean like world-class developers, and they
Parham
always
level developers.
no like beyond way beyond where I could go, and 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 what they do is they always contribute, and they do it for a selfish reason sometimes, and that's because in as they're
Selfish
contributing.
reasons.
Yeah. And then like and that's because as they're contributing, they're learning a whole lot about things that they didn't know before. Like imagine you're, contributing to the CSS library and then suddenly you realize, "Oh, so that's how this framework worked." And yesterday I didn't really have to know how it worked because I was just using it, but now I'm a contributor and now I need to know how it works before I can fix it. And a lot of them, get hired because they are listed as a contributor to one of these big projects. A lot of them learn a lot about
Oh,
development because they learned how to write better code by understanding something that they didn't understand, you know, a day ago. And so you grow by contributing. You help make the world a better place, but you also pull yourself up as you're making the world a better place. So it's a win-win.
and you made a point that I think is really exciting. So that extra homework that, oh hey, go fix the boot camp, go fix the boot camp, go fix the Bootstrap is a library. Oh gosh, a framework. I'm very clever tonight. You see why folks like Platypus are always lovingly fussing at me to sort myself out. But you're suggesting that if I go make this fix to a framework, that's professionally beneficial for me. That sounds cool in an interview.
Exactly. Yes. And nowadays with GitHub, it's really easy to showcase that kind of work.
Oh yeah, or GitLab or Bitbucket. We're equal opportunity Pinterest for code. Oh gosh, what's Pinterest is a bit passe these days. I used to call it Flickr for code, and somebody pointed out I'm a bit old, and that like Flickr's dead. Flickr's Flickr's not a thing anymore. You know what? I'm going to take a wild guess that you were never a big Flickr user.
Uh, no, and not a big Instagram user.
No.
Surprise.
I should Instagram. That's where I should go with that. But while I extract my foot from my mouth, Tanya's just like, Jess, I got you. I got you. Look, here's your out. Tanya's saying, hey, a follow-up question. And look at what a good question this is, or listen to what a good question this is. So we've been talking about how accessibility can be included in web design, but how can we start to include this in other fields, like, for example, product or service design processes? And Tanya's asking specifically because it sounds like your payment experience was really badly designed, not
Yeah,
just badly coded, but
yeah,
badly designed as well.
yeah, yeah. And interestingly, when I got in touch with that app, y- one of the things that the person I was talking to was saying was that, oh, that thing, that got you? Yeah, we've been getting a lot of reports about people not being able to use that. And I was like, wait, what?
What?
Really? You have so many
Y'all
like
knew?
screen reader users? And then he was like, no, but like it's just hard to find for everyone. It's you can never find it. Most people can very, very like hard find it in a very hard way. They can find it over time, but it's just that it takes them more time. It's just that it's impossible for you. And so to your point, Tanya, most of the time when something is not designed well, um, everyone gets to pay the price for it. I guess people with more diverse needs get to pay that price even more. Thanks, but everyone doesn't.
Yay.
so so like a product or service, and this is where your question about empathy comes in, right? As you get better at putting yourself in place of someone using your product or your service, you get to have these, you know, I guess momentary flashes of insight about like, oh, if I just have a button that toggles a mute on a mic, a person who can never actually like see the light would never know if it's on or off. Oh, maybe it should be a switch, or maybe it should be a, I don't know, maybe it should be a toggle and not stick out completely and be like go in and then you press it again and then it goes out, or something. And then that's kind of like how you do. And I'm going to use booking as an example here, right? Like one of the things that we're working on uh, for a long, long uh, future ahead is how do we make flights accessible? How do we make hotels accessible? How do we make attractions accessible? These are all of the things that you can book on booking. But like, let's say you have someone that says, I'm a wheelchair user. How do we make their entire trip accessible? And that's a really hard kind of question to answer because like you see wheelchair user, I see wheelchair user who prefers to move themselves from their wheelchair to the bed using their arms because they have arm mobility versus like someone who doesn't have arm mobility and has to basically push themselves out of the chair. So like there's like all these tiny changes where you know you expect people see the world in one way or interact with the world with one way and they do it the other way. And as you kind of like learn more and more about all sorts of different experiences by sharing these, learning about them, reading about them, I don't know, and kind of like having conversations like this, you end up kind of getting an appreciation of this diversity along the spectrum. And as a result, you just become better at foreseeing and designing in a way that takes all of these use cases into account.
Yeah, that sounds really useful. Did you want me to just put questions up, or would you like praise as well? No, let's do praise as well. We've got someone saying, we've got Dragnarak saying, oh, do you know what? Parham sounds so smart and so humble.
Thanks.
And I know that you just
I found my
absolutely die
personal.
in the inside when you get praised too much. So I thought I'd be mean.
Thanks.
Every time I talk, like every time we have a call, I bully you through over use of praise, don't I? It's just the
Yeah.
cruelest
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And I wanted to come back around to sort of something we talked about a little earlier, especially in the context of what you just said. So you said, hey, you know what, at booking, we really think about this core access need. We have people who are going to, and we have people who deserve, who have the right to travel and explore the world and travel for work and to see their family. And it's our responsibility to give them access to that. Um, can you talk to, and this is a trick question. I know that this is me being bad. I know that I'm asking this in a terrible way, but can you talk to me about what kinds of applications or what kinds of projects we don't need to bother with accessibility around for specific? So, what kinds of things do we just not need to worry about making accessible to screen reader users? Or, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a really, really great question. And I think, I guess part of me has the sense that everyone has this question in the back of their mind, but like political correctness means that we never get to ask it, but we think it, and then we act around it, but no one really acknowledges it. So 10 points for actually calling out the elephant in the room. Um, and you know, I was talking to the director of, so Nemensa is a company that does consulting around accessibility, and I was talking to their director of design, and they're in the UK, pretty close to Jess.
Oh,
Um,
really? We'll do a field trip sometime when
yeah,
travel comes back in
yeah,
2027.
yeah, or eight, but and and
Oh, wait,
and
you work for a travel website. We'll get on that plane tomorrow.
Yay. Uh, and so like one of the things that he was talking about is they did this research into a company in the UK that actually makes like provides a functionality to pay road tolls as you're going through
Oh,
the, you know,
yeah. You don't have
and
to make that accessible, right? You're fine.
yeah, and
Sarcastically, sarcastically.
I mean, it makes sense. Like, which blind guy drives a car? I mean, I don't.
Not
Maybe
yet.
someone
Not with
does.
that attitude.
Yes. I read this story once on the newspaper of some blind guy stealing a car, but we'll get into that later. Um,
You can't start the lead and be like, "Oh, yeah, I heard this interesting story." I'd be like, "No, wait, go back. I have questions." But
yeah,
important
yeah,
things first, then
yeah.
my
He
dawning horror and being impressed.
well, I'll just add that with he drove into a tree, but
Oh, or the tree came at him. We don't have all the facts.
yes, exactly, and so like so they did this research of, well, who actually uses this software and why do they use it, and something that they found, which was really interesting but obvious when you think about it, is, well, you know, the person who's driving, you know, is totally fine. They don't have any visual issues, hopefully. And then but they have a spouse or a partner or a child who, well, or a son or a daughter who wants to actually pay for the actual toll on their phone, and these are the people that need that ability to be able to use
Oh,
that app, because otherwise the driver has to do it, and what does
and you
that
don't
mean?
want them playing with a phone at the same time.
Yes, yeah, totally. And this was a really good reason for their executives to actually start prioritizing fixing this issue for road safety, for making other people able to kind of like pay way in advance before they even went through the trip, because it just increased safety for everyone. And this is where you kind of like see one change cascading into multiple good results. So that's a really good kind of like um, realization that I noticed was happening in the industry. So I'm really happy about that.
So I'm going to be a little bit spiky. So you are so gentle and so lovely. And it seems very inappropriate to welcome a guest speaker and say, "Oh, well, I'd love your opinions. Can I have my can I get my opinion on what we need to make accessible and what we don't? Because mine might be a little bit spiky." Um, but I think that the core concept, this idea of why we invented, I say we invented the web, why Berners-Lee invented the web, and that why we've continued to build on it. You like we collaboratively. Yeah, I must have done something at some time. But the reason the web is so exciting is this idea of openness, is this collab, like anybody who wants to should be able to come and see the thing. If you're building something for the web, if you're going to put the time into making it, shouldn't people using screen readers or using any kind of different assistive technology, don't they deserve to be able to see that? Otherwise, it feels like sort of weird roundabout censorship through laziness.
Thanks for the spike. Yes, that is totally true.
I was very, but like, oh gosh, how do I do this without swearing? And be like, oh gosh is a good, oh, we've got somebody else's warm take. And this warm take is going to bring me into some questions that I've been dying to ask. So platypus, the always correct and always lovely platypus says, oh, people should remember to set alt text on images that not just that they post on the web, but that they tweet or put on social media as well. Right? You agree?
Yep, totally.
Now, my own question, save me from myself. Talk to me about writing good alt text. Do you want like a short paragraph? Should I say a photograph of or a picture of, full stop at the end? What are we doing here? What makes your day? Oh, that's a meaningful pause. I love this.
Yeah, I always take a pause before answering this kind of question because it requires a lot of grounding. Not going to spin off into a whole tangent.
Well,
But
let's go talk to me first about bad alt text.
so I have trouble deciding between two categories of alt text, like which is the worst. There is
Ooh.
the I had to put something here, so let me put something totally useless. But there's also the
Nobody does. You know what? Every day I wake up and I believe in people, and then I discover something new and realize that people don't just like write some nonsense, do they?
they do, yeah.
Do you have
And
a list of these people and where they live?
um, no, but you've
No,
given
no,
me
no,
ideas.
no,
I
no.
mean, but like
Not
I
yet.
can start gathering this information and give them to Jess.
And send them
But
coal for the holidays.
yeah. And then there's the other category of alt text, which is like, how should I put this?
Ooh.
Uh, like totally useless in the sense like tree. Uh,
Sorry, I'm so sorry. Oh, if
and
somebody does that in all caps, does it
it
indicate
says
to
TREE.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow. Oh, that must be so much fun. How
yeah,
exciting. What an app.
yeah. Yeah, it sounds like an acronym, and then I do a Google, like, what is this TREE? That's very new, and I've missed out, and I don't find anything, and then I feel stupid.
Well, not, and you shouldn't feel stupid for other people being bad at things. But one thing I absolutely always forget when I chat to you is is English like your third language or your fourth? Is there something absolutely dizzying about the number of languages you speak as well?
It's my third, but it's
Oh,
my
only
best
my
language.
third.
Yeah, yeah, but it's my I would say it's my go-to when I'm trying to explain something complicated, mostly because a lot of these words were like the first time I encountered it in English, and so
Oh,
I'm yeah, and yeah, the fact that English is my third language is why like you hear me going tongue tied sometimes. Blah, 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 blah. So that's kind of that.
you
Um,
are far more eloquent and yeah, gracious
that's
than
thank
I
you.
am in English. So
Yeah.
I'm going to just gloss right over. But so just typing in gibberish, bad. No alt text, bad. Typing tree, all caps, also bad. Talk to me about what's better. So what yeah, describe it if it's not a bother. I'm just telling you what to do. So bossy. Would
Yeah,
you
I'm
mind?
used to that. Yeah.
par-
So
I mean, I can get on a train and yell at you in person.
let's see. I'd like to see you do that one. It's going to be fun. Um, I guess the so when people ask me questions like this, I try to give them principles to live by, no, to always kind of like keep in
To live
mind,
by.
to yeah, to develop by, or to write alt text by. And this one is pretty simple. If you have an image, ask yourself, why is this here? What is it
Ooh.
trying to say? And that's the best alt text. And sometimes this means no alt text, because, for example, let's say,
We learned this today. I'm excited. Sorry.
yay.
Oh, yesterday. I've forgotten how time works as well. We learned
Yeah.
this week.
And that means, like, for example, let's say you have a post about how the number of your followers on social media has been increasing and how your fame is going across nations now.
Your
And then you
fame, yes, obviously.
Yeah, yeah. Mine. Yeah, thank you. I'm trying to get better at taking compliments. And then you make this, you add this chart to your post, which is like, I don't know, like an upwards trend. So you have two choices here. If you're asking yourself, why am I putting this here? I mean, obviously, if like Jess, for example, is putting it there, maybe she's a bit egotistic. Maybe she's trying to tell everyone how
Again,
great she is.
brave for a man who is a train ride away from my wrath.
You know.
For folks watching at home, I don't know his specific address yet. I'll get it. I'll be like, oh, we're going to send you a thank you gift. And then I'll show up and yell at him.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
I'm not
I'll be,
actually threatening him. I am.
yeah, great. I'll just pretend like you're not, for compliance reasons. And so so like, then if you're asking yourself, like, why am I putting it here? Is your point the fact that it's been going up? Is it the fact that it's been going up through a period of 3 months? Is it the fact that it's been going up through the period of 3 months and the most increase has been in Southeast Asia? Like, what are you trying to convey here? And this defines what you do next. You
Yeah.
either provide that in an alt text, or you provide that in your text following the image, which is the thing that flows the best. And if you look at like posts by good writers, you will notice that they have this image which is going to visualize something, but they call out the most important thing that they're trying to show, which is useful because, one, if someone is actually good at learning with visuals, they learn that way, and if someone learns by reading, they learn the other way. And then that way, this is alt text. It's not an alt text that you write specifically for screen readers. Everyone benefits from you curating information and directing their attention to the thing that matters most. And I would say, personally, I'm going for no alt text, but good
Oh.
writing. Um,
So I'm really excited. I promise that Parham, back me up. I didn't bribe you to say that, did I?
oh,
That's a long
you did. You did scare me that you would show up in my house, and you know,
but that's just now. That wasn't specific to you talking about effective writing. Because actually,
no.
our guest speaker next Wednesday is going to be Ashley, who's brilliant. And she's going to be talking to us about accessible writing specifically, which, oh gosh, I'm gonna steal that soundbite from you. Very, very convenient.
Great, great.
Uh, so
I'm
we've got a
glad
couple.
I contributed to that.
I've got a short question from Tanya and then a really, really good, really interesting, ooh, possibly controversial one from Moser. And Tanya's saying, hey, remember when you yelled tree at us? You know what? Sometimes on the web, people emphasize and they write in all caps. But for screen reader users, should we stop doing that?
No.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, I've it's been done so much that everyone has adapted to the fact that it's being done. Screen readers actually don't necessarily do anything extra if it's a sentence. So, like, most of
oh.
the time, I even breeze by someone screaming, and I never even notice. So, like,
I
so,
mean, I scream at you so often, it just fades into the background, doesn't it?
I mean, your voice specifically doesn't, but like, if you were doing that in a text message, probably. But like, yeah, I would say, with all the problems on the web, capitalizing something to show how much it matters to you is the least of the problems.
Okay, you can't say that without hitting us. I mean, you can, but oh, please don't say that without hitting us with what are some of these other things that folks are doing that are reasonably common that are just annoying as heck?
The most important one is not using semantic markup.
Oh,
And
so
yeah,
use semantic HTML or Jess will yell at you and Parham will cry.
yeah.
Yeah.
And write posts with all caps just to say how sad he is or how angry he is.
Uh, do you know what this comes in and out of fashion, but I see it on social media sometimes. Is it extremely annoying when folks use like fancy letters?
Oh,
Oh,
um,
or like stack a bunch of emojis.
yeah. I don't really have a problem with emojis, but like fancy letters,
Yes, more
I
emoji.
yeah, yeah. Emojis are fine because screen readers have gotten smart enough to I guess summarize them like 3 hugging face emoji, 5 crying with laughter emoji, So like
Okay.
so
Oh, I always thought that if I did a bunch of those in a row, it would just be like you showing up at my house to be like, absolutely not.
yeah, no, no. I think there are a lot of barriers to that. First of all, I need to acquire a sidearm. Second, I need to figure out how to use that sidearm without actually seeing where the other. I mean, like, there's a whole ton of stuff. But like, no,
We'll
it's
we'll
not
have
that
to
bad.
plan. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but it's not that bad if you're using emojis. The characters that are like kind of weird though. Um, First of all, not all screen readers can read all Unicode characters. VoiceOver on iOS and VoiceOver on Mac can do the most number of Unicode characters that I've seen. Uh, but even then, there's like, I don't know, Catalan letter U52 is not really helpful in me finding out that that was meant to be some sort of view.
Yeah. So if you're using unexpected or less common, there we are. If you're using less common global characters for emphasis or for decoration, it's probably just going to make the day of people using screen readers much more difficult.
Yeah, and this is again, I don't want to make, I guess, something that I'm very wary of. Wow, look how I pronounced all of that stuff correctly. Is is making accessibility this checklist of things that you have to do, which drains the fun and you know uh, spontaneity out of life and everything. And to some extent, what's happening is that if you're using these characters, um, a lot of devices might not be able to render it. People who might be using Zoom might not be able to actually see it properly. There are all sorts of people with different kinds of like visual impairments that are not total like mine, but like you're making it also difficult for them to understand what you're talking about. So here's the thing: if just as I said about your app, your website, whatever, if your message really matters, you owe it to everyone to put it in a way that everyone can read. And that's all I say.
I love that where you're just like, look, it's not just me as a screen reader. You're annoying a lot of other people. Kindly stop it if you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a bit of a longer question. So I said, hey, Parham, what are your experience with some of the CSS platforms, for example, like Joomla or WordPress or Drupal, concerning accessibility? Mosaic is really interested in this, especially because, well, the code to build up these pages has been made by several developers. This has been made by a team. Does that mean that you're seeing these Joomla, WordPress, Drupal stuff? Are these feeling more accessible or less? Or are some of them better than others?
Yeah, so these go through phases. So I'm not really sure what the latest is because I've been away from PHP for like 5 years, sadly. Um, but
PHP doesn't get enough credit for being like really laid back to write.
yeah, yeah, and the fact that so much of web runs on it too. Um, and so like it so with Drupal and WordPress and and Joomla, a really important thing is most of the experience of you as the site administrator and your users depend on what theme you're using. So you could be taking WordPress as an accessible CMS and turn that completely unusable by using a theme that's not accessible. So what you'll
Ooh.
notice is like if I if I remember right that most of these themes have been tagged with the word accessible because of the fact that the developer is aware of accessibility issues and they've written standard code that's accessible. So if this matters to you, I'm glad that you're asking, which means it does matter to you. Do use the themes that have some indication saying that they have been written with accessibility in mind. Maybe use that as a base and then modify that to fit your needs rather than settling for something that you don't like just because it's not accessible, because that's not what I like people to do.
So cool. Go ahead and try out some of these platforms. I might add, I'm always a little bit bold to say, oh, hey, maybe you're going to want to test these with a screen reader the same way you might if you were doing it all from scratch. But also look specifically for accessible themes and test that again. When in doubt, test and test and test.
Yeah, and for once, Jess is providing really good advice.
I get
But
such bravery, such boldness.
yeah, just
Um,
just until travel is like not coming back. But like I guess you'll see me in a different way next time if travel is back. But like it's as you test these out, you get a better experience of what's actually working and what's not, and you become much faster at testing it. So next time you're going to test something, it's going to be quickly turning Orca or VoiceOver or NVDA or TalkBack or whatever you're using, turning that on, testing that specific bit. Okay, get that not accessible. Okay, turning it off. Or yes, accessible. Okay, turning it off. And as like if you get better at this, you can start adding other stuff on top, right? Just turn on zoom and see
yeah.
what happens when you zoom in, what happens when you zoom out.
Ah, great timing. Because I've got a question from Tanya. And this might be a little bit of a specific one. I don't know if you use this. And I love these questions because I don't know. And I didn't even know to ask. And Tanya's saying, hey, how would subtitles in movies or like closed captioning in live meetings like Zoom, do screen readers pick up stuff like that?
They do, but I mean they can, but I never turn those on because if my screen reader is talking at the same time that, for example, Jess is talking, that all comes through the same channel, uh, which makes it really hard for me to focus. Like my brain just cannot, like, the words that Jess are saying get interlaced with what my screen reader is saying. So that gets a little bit confusing. So I turn that off. What usually is helpful though in videos and stuff, and I think uh, the someone has a really hard to pronounce nickname that is always right, and they mentioned Talkback and uh, um,
Oh,
Orca.
was that platypus?
Yes. They
Wait. Oh gosh, I'm sorry to be so weird about a language thing. Have you heard of a platypus before?
Nope.
Oh, I'm sorry. This has nothing to do with programming or accessibility. I'm so excited to get to describe this because I'm really, really interested what it might be called in one of your home languages. So it's like a little tiny weasel that lives in the
Okay.
water, but it's got a duck bill and it lives in
Okay.
Australia.
Wow, that's very specific. Okay.
Oh, wait, have you not heard of these before?
No.
Yeah, there's little like mammals that lay eggs that have duck bills that live in Australia.
Oh, okay. Now
Somebody's pointing out that like, oh, Perry the platypus is a cartoon thing that you may have heard of. But
no.
yeah, the next time we have a virtual tea, I'm just going to be like, yeah, let's talk about platypuses.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it sounds made up. It sounds like I'm messing with you, right?
I mean, I do trust you, but if yeah.
But not a lot. You're like, I trust you a little bit, but I'm gonna be looking this up on DuckDuckGo later.
Or just go to YouTube and search platypus and then see what comes up.
Oh, I don't even know if they make any sounds as well. Well, you
Yeah,
get some splashing.
yeah. But like, what was I even saying? Oh yeah, about captioning. I think it was Platypus that was talking about alt text. When people are
Yeah.
tweeting or putting things out on social media, they should kind of like put in alt text. Some companies have also started, well, apart from taking that advice, they've started putting out video with audio description on. And what
Ooh.
that
Yeah.
is, you have this on Netflix. You can try it out on your favorite series. Just go to the audio tracks and you can just turn on audio description. And a lot of them have that. Apple TV has it. Not sure if Prime has that as well. But like basically, you you start having this kind of uh, like separate audio track of someone describing what's happening between dialogue, and it's really good for um, like understanding what's happening in a video. So where available, I use audio description rather than
Ooh.
captioning or anything similar because it's been crafted to come just at the right time. Like my screen reader doesn't know where when Jess starts talking and stops talking to tell me any information. But because of the fact that the audio track has been laid on the actual audio of the movie, the audio description comes in exactly at the right time when there's like a break in someone talking or when something specific and very important is happening. So that's a really cool experience to try if you all are interested.
Oh, that's fantastic. And we've got a really, really good question. So Monica's asking, hey, are there any agile development? And they've got visualization in quotation marks. They're like, hey, are there any agile development sort of visualization tools that you prefer for understanding upcoming work, like backlog stuff and priorities? So yeah, for accessibility, what kinds of either ticketing systems or issue tracking system, what kinds of agile tools work the least bad or the best from a screen reader's perspective?
Um, So this is one of the category of things that people thought is not worth making accessible that much, because
Really?
like which screen reader user ends up to be a developer, right?
What?
Uh,
No, no. I feel like it's been me making a lot of empty threats, but should we just like roll up to Jira's office and be like,
oh
do you
yeah,
know
please.
what?
Atlassian is the
Atlassian
most
bought
horrible.
them and they have an office in Australia. So here's the plan.
Platypus goes there.
Yeah, we go on booking.com. Hey, a plug. Head to Australia. We confirm that platypuses exist, and I'm not sure how we'd do that. And then we show up in the Atlassian office mad, just mad as hell.
Yeah. We can
No
also just
normal
take an
weekend.
army of platypuses with us.
I
Just
imagine that Australians are not going to be afraid of anything that lives outside there. Like they're inured to it.
oh crap, wombats.
So yeah, what's the least bad sort of tools? If folks, and I hope this question's useful for, if folks are choosing tooling for their team,
Yeah,
what's going to be
yeah,
the most accessible? And it sounds like the most accessible. The question really here is, what's going to suck the least?
yeah, and sadly, there's not really a good answer for that.
Whoa.
I think Jira sucks the least, but like it sucks a whole lot. So like I don't know, like for example, with Trello, the entire workflow is based off of, and I think you all will find this very interesting, dragging and dropping, which is
Oh,
something.
oh,
Yeah, yeah, that's
this
the sin
is
of all sins.
Oh no. For learners or for folks who haven't realized the full horror of that, why is dragging and dropping the absolute worst thing you can do from an accessibility perspective?
Yeah. Once again, let me, because I'm very sensitive to making accessibility something that's going to get in your way, make you have horrible experiences because everyone else has drag and drop and I don't, and no one's going to use my app because I'm not allowing drag and drop because I want to be accessible. And so, it's not white and black like that. I don't think anyone has a problem with drag and drop if that's one way to do something. And if someone, a user, wants to drag and drop stuff, cool, they can go ahead and do that. And if they can't for any reason, then they have another way to do it. And that's where, for example, having keyboard shortcuts comes in, where having menu items where they allow you to do exactly the same thing comes in. So that's with that disclaimer. Um, Let me get into why dragging and dropping is so bad. But I think after listening to me talk for a while, you're probably having some really big good ideas. The first one is if you have any sort of motor impairment and you cannot use a mouse, or you cannot use a mouse accurately, let's say, because you don't have fine motor control, you're not going to exactly drag the right thing and drop it exactly in the right place. If you don't have good color perception, then all of
Oh,
these visual cues of, oh, you're now dragging and you're now dropping and you should drop it here and all of that stuff is going to be a problem for you to discern. If you are using the keyboard for any reason, because you, for example, have a baby in one of your hands, right? Like you have the baby in your right hand and you're trying to mark something as done as you're saying, like, yes, he's so cute. You can't really do that because you have to drag and drop, and you can't really use a mouse with your left hand, so you're stuck, right? So, like, all of these things are making a user's experience worse by making drag and drop the only experience. I mean, screen reader users just cannot drag and drop. There's that. Um, so it's fine if Jira or Trello or in your own web application, in the next big thing that you're going to build, drag and drop is a thing. The
yeah.
problem is when it's the only thing. That's where it becomes a problem.
That's really useful. Thank you. So I didn't expect where you were like, haha, they all suck. Oh gosh. And do you know what? So that means if any of our listeners or anybody who's going to listen to this after the fact is really interested in starting their own thing, say, oh, I'm going to build this really cool tool. It sounds like they can really get ahead by creating some kind of agile tool or creating one of these visualiz or backlog or task tools that is accessible. That's going to be sort of a really easy sell for these big companies that have a lot of compliance. The ability to go to Microsoft or Google and say, "Oh, hey, do you want to buy this tool? It'll keep you from getting sued."
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, and I mean, there's the more human aspect to that as well. We
yeah.
have a population of 1 billion people with some sort of disability, and this is permanent disabilities. I'm not even talking about someone breaking an arm or someone having a handful or someone being in the street and not being able to see something because of the sun glare and the color contrast going like all weird and all of that, right? Um, by making something like this accessible, you're making it easier for all of these companies to provide jobs to people who need them. And I there's been many people who had to quit their job because these tools are not accessible, because they're like, oh yeah, I work in a call center, which all the other aspects of my job are very accessible to me. Turns out I can't really open a ticket or close a ticket or pass a ticket on to another colleague or anything like that, just because Jira or Trello or all the other numerous ones that I've tried.
Yeah, no, that's so useful. And to say in a happy voice, oh, that's so useful for something that is a gate which can prevent people from joining teams or prevent people from being successful at work. How
Yeah.
impossibly frustrating.
Yeah, yeah. So the only way I've been able to solve that problem is to use OmniFocus for my personal task management. And OmniFocus is a productivity app that is running on iOS and Mac. And they started becoming more and more accessible since like 2018 or 19. And I've been working with them on the very last beta to try to test out
Oh,
and give feedback and all of that. Yeah.
well, they have
So
a
like
little icon that says a little accessible icon, good alt text that says Parham approved.
Um, that's a certification that we're working on right
It's a
now.
little
Uh,
heart shape.
yeah, yeah, and it with my face in it, I guess.
I mean, yeah, they want to make it as cute as possible. Of course, they'd
Yeah,
include your
yeah,
face.
yeah. Preferably with a smile on like this, with my teeth out, but
Oh,
like standing next to a
a
what?
platypus.
Yeah, exactly. There we go.
I cannot, like, other people in the chat can back me up. Platypuses do exist. They just sound ridiculous.
Yeah. Okay.
We've gone ahead and we've held up your time for about an hour and a half. Are there any words of wisdom or gentle threats that you'd like to leave us with? Oh, do we have? Yeah.
Do we have what?
Oh, I was gonna say I was talking to myself. I'm just dreadful all the time.
Yeah, I okay. So first of all, do keep in touch. Um, my website is myfullname.com. My Twitter, if you follow Jess, you've seen her
Oh
tweet.
no, don't tell them it's possible to follow me on Twitter. It's no.
If you, I told you she's egotistic. Um, um, if you have found Jess's Twitter account by mistake or by
There we are.
accident,
That's much more likely.
yeah, you'll see her referring to my username or the handle on Twitter. I don't usually tweet, but do reach out if you have any questions. If you want me to help you out with something, I'm up for calls, conversations, chats, whatever
You heard
is
it here first. Parham will help you move. Parham will loan you money. Parham will cat sit. Really, whatever you're looking for. Is that's what you were getting
yeah,
at?
yeah, exactly. Uh, and I will even walk your dog if you want to. Although I'm not really sure if your dog will come back or I will come back, but like at least I'll take your dog off your hands if
It's a
that's
one-way dog walk. Like,
yeah,
yeah, anything else is a bonus.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, so that's one thing that I wanted to say. And the second one is um if like once you've learned a little bit more about HTML and CSS and JavaScript, do go and look at the WCAG guidelines. So that's WCAG. So that's Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and this is basically where uh, you can kind of like see some examples of what's accessible, what's not accessible, how to make something accessible, and you're going to face really tricky problems on the web because like let's say you're making a slideshow. How do you make
Yeah.
that accessible? What does a slideshow
Oh,
that's accessible even look like, and so on? Because we don't have a slideshow HTML. I mean
yeah.
tag, and so like do look at that, and that's going to make your life a lot easier. You're still going to kind of like test it if you like. Put yourself in your user's shoes. That will make you a better developer and a better person. But if you actually want to see that stuff in practice and in really good examples, definitely look at WCAG.
Yeah. And that's from the W3C folks again, isn't it?
Yeah, so the
Our
workload
good friends who make the rules for the web, the
yeah,
guidelines, the
yeah,
suggestions, the rules.
yeah. They're not as spiky as you, so they're guidelines.
I'm just like HTML over JavaScript all the time. And they're just like, oh, well, if you want to do this, here are the rules. We suppose if you want. Um, Parham, thank you so much for your time. You are always, I think somebody said brilliant and humble, but you're always just a joy to chat to.
Likewise, I really like the opportunity to be here. It's really amazing, and most importantly, I'm really glad that you all were engaged, interested, asked really great questions, and really like I would say daring questions as well, which I always love to see because we all get better together as these kind of topics emerge, and we get better at answering them, handling them, maybe even like getting comfortable with the fact that we don't have answers for some of these right now. And so thanks a lot for contributing to a better world.
Oh, to a better world. Look at how charming you are. You are an absolute gift. And well, I've got you here. My apologies to every single person who's here for messing the time up and making it really inconvenient for you all. Just to recap, you can hang out with Parham on Twitter. He'll help you move. He'll loan you money. Don't ask for it. He'll walk your dog. And thank you so much for joining us again. So again, my apologies for messing up the time, and I hope everybody has the easiest possible early morning, middle of the night. And to reassure you, all of my threats were empty, except for showing up at your house and fussing at you, Parham.
Yes, and thanks a lot for telling me about the new discovery that I've had, the platypus.
The platypus, yeah. The next time I chat to you, I will make up an imaginary animal, and with the exact same amount of like, no, it's real, just like a platypus. Remember, I told you. You believed me.
Yes.
Fabulous. Thank you so much,
Thanks a
and have the
lot.
easiest night.
You
Bye,
too.
everybody.
Have a great day.